She spoke to his rival, and the billionaire CEO's jealous stare said everything. Hello everyone. Before we begin today's story, I have a small favor to ask. Please hit subscribe and turn on the notification bell so you never miss our channel's new videos. It's quick, free, and the best way to support us in bringing you more dramatic stories. Your support means the world to us. Where are you watching from? Drop your city or country in the comments below. Thank you very much. Now, let's get back to our main character. The rain hadn't stopped since morning, when Lena Hart stood outside the towering glass building of Coal Industries, clutching the envelope that held her termination letter. Her shoes were soaked, her coat thin against the icy wind. Just last week, she had been Ethan Cole's executive assistant, the girl who knew his schedule down to the minute, who brewed his coffee just the way he liked it black, no sugar, no warmth. But today, she was nobody. Her mother's medical bills stacked higher than her courage, and her savings were down to the last few $100s. She had promised herself she wouldn't cry, but as the lobby doors shut behind her, the tears finally fell, blending with the rain. A voice behind her cut through the sound of traffic. Miss Hart. She froze. That voice, low, calm, and commanding, belonged to one man only. Turning slowly, she saw Ethan Cole himself standing under an umbrella, the city lights reflecting off his dark-tailored suit. His expression, as always, unreadable. "Come with me," he said simply. Inside the limousine, the silence was suffocating. Lena clutched her bag tighter, her mind spinning. "Why did you call me back, Mr. Cole?" she finally asked. Ethan's gaze didn't leave the rain-streaked window. "I have a proposition for you," he said. "A business arrangement." He turned to face her then, his gray eyes sharp. "I need a wife." Lena blinked. I'm sorry? Not a real one," he clarified. "Just on paper. For 6 months." He slid a folder toward her, a contract printed on heavy cream stock, his signature already at the bottom. "In exchange, you'll receive $200,000, enough to cover your mother's treatment and more." Lena stared at him, disbelief and anger twisting inside her. "You think marriage is just another transaction?" Ethan's jaw tightened. "It's a necessity. My board won't approve the merger unless I appear stable, a family man. You fit the profile. You know my world, you're discreet, and you need the money." The bluntness stung. She wanted to throw the contract back in his face, but the image of her mother lying in that hospital bed stopped her. "And what happens after 6 months?" she asked quietly. "We divorce," he said, his tone clipped, businesslike. "You walk away with your payment. No strings, no complications." Lena looked down at the signature on the page, his name bold, certain, and then at her trembling hands. "Why me?" she whispered. His answer was immediate. "Because you're the only one I can trust not to fall in love with me." That arrogance, that cold certainty, made her chest tighten with something she couldn't name. But desperation is louder than pride. She signed. That night, under the sterile lights of a private chapel, they stood side by side before a justice of the peace. No flowers, no music, no witnesses, just a deal sealed in silence. When Ethan slipped the ring on her finger, it was too loose, sliding against her skin like a reminder that it didn't belong there. He didn't smile. He didn't have to. His eyes said it all. This was business, not love. Yet when their hands brushed, a spark she didn't expect shot through her. He pulled away first. "You'll move into the penthouse tomorrow. My assistant will handle everything." And just like that, she was Mrs. Ethan Cole, at least on paper. As the limousine carried her home through the misty streets, Lena watched her reflection in the window. A girl who had traded her freedom for survival. Somewhere deep inside, a voice whispered, "You've just made the biggest mistake of your life." But another voice, softer, desperate, replied, "Or maybe, the only chance you'll ever get." And neither of them knew that this fake marriage would soon turn into something neither contract nor pride could contain. The next morning, sunlight poured through the tall windows of Ethan Cole's penthouse, bouncing off marble floors and glass walls that looked out over Manhattan. Lena woke in the guest bedroom to the sound of distant traffic, her head pounding with the weight of everything that had happened. She glanced at the simple gold band on her finger. It felt heavier than metal should. In less than 12 hours, she had gone from unemployed to the wife of one of the richest men in New York. The thought made her stomach twist. A soft knock came at the door. Ethan's assistant, Marianne, stepped in carrying a tablet. "Good morning, Mrs. Cole," she said briskly. "Mr. Cole asked me to give you today's schedule. Your first public appearance as his wife will be this evening at the board dinner." Lena blinked. Tonight? Yes. The press will be there. Mr. Cole expects punctuality. The door closed before Lena could protest. She sat on the edge of the bed, rubbing her temples. She had no dress, no experience, no idea how to act like a billionaire's wife. Only the memory of her mother's hospital room kept her from falling apart. Hours later, a team of stylists and designers filled the penthouse like a storm. They pinned her hair, fitted her in an emerald gown that shimmered under the light, and painted confidence onto her face with careful strokes. When Ethan appeared in the doorway, dressed in a black tuxedo, she barely recognized herself in his eyes. He paused, the faintest flicker of surprise breaking through his usual composure. "You look adequate," he said, clearing his throat. She arched an eyebrow. "Adequate? That is the best compliment you have?" A ghost of a smile touched his lips. "Do not get used to it." That evening, the ballroom at the Grand Metropolitan gleamed like liquid gold. Chandeliers glittered above a sea of executives, investors, and cameras. Ethan led Lena through the crowd with the calm authority of a man born to own every room he entered. She followed half a step behind, feeling the weight of every gaze on her. "Smile," he murmured under his breath. "You are doing fine." The words were softer than she expected. Then a voice interrupted them. Ethan Cole, as charming as ever. A tall man approached, his expression smooth but his eyes sharp. "Lucas Hale," Ethan said, his tone cooling instantly. "Still trying to steal my clients, I see." Lucas's smile widened. "Only the smart ones." His attention shifted to Lena. "And who might this be?" "My wife," Ethan said before she could speak. The word hung in the air like a challenge. Lucas took her hand and kissed it lightly. "A pleasure, Mrs. Cole. You must be very brave." Lena laughed politely, unsure what else to do. She asked him a question about his company, and he answered with practiced charm. She did not notice Ethan watching, his jaw tightening, his glass of champagne untouched. To anyone else, his expression would seem calm, but his eyes told another story. He could not look away from her easy smile, her genuine curiosity. It was the first time he had seen her act without fear, and it stirred something he could not name. When Lucas leaned in slightly, whispering a joke that made her laugh, Ethan's grip on the glass cracked faintly. The stem snapped, a drop of champagne spilling onto his cuff. "Excuse me," he muttered, stepping away before anyone noticed. He went to the balcony, the night air biting against his skin. For the first time, he wondered what exactly he had started. Inside, Lena continued her conversation, unaware of the storm she had triggered. When she finally found him outside, he stood staring at the skyline, his shoulders rigid. "You left early," she said softly. "Did I say something wrong?" He turned, his voice clipped. "No, I just forgot how much I dislike small talk." She frowned. "Or maybe you just dislike seeing me talk to anyone else." His gaze met hers, sharp and unreadable. "You are imagining things, Mrs. Cole." But his eyes betrayed him dark, possessive and burning with something far too human for a man who claimed to feel nothing. For a heartbeat, neither spoke. The city hummed below them, the wind tugging at her hair. Then he looked away. "We should go," he said quietly. "The car is waiting." As they walked back inside, Lena glanced at his hand. The cuff of his shirt was still damp from the champagne, his knuckles faintly red. A silent truth settled between them, whatever this marriage was supposed to be. Pretending was no longer easy. The car ride back to the penthouse was wrapped in silence. The city lights flickered across the tinted windows, tracing faint reflections on Lena's face. She sat upright, hands clasped in her lap, trying to read Ethan's expression, but his eyes were fixed on the skyline, his jaw set in stone. The air between them was thick with unspoken tension, sharper than the winter wind outside. When the elevator doors opened to their floor, Ethan stepped out first without a word. Lena followed, her heels clicking against the marble. Finally, she spoke, her voice steady but low. "If you have something to say, Mr. Cole, say it." He turned, the faintest trace of disbelief in his eyes. "What do you expect me to say? Anything that is honest?" She shot back. "Because so far all I have seen is a man who hides behind contracts and cold looks." Ethan exhaled slowly, running a hand through his hair, a rare crack in his perfect composure. "Do you always have to push?" "Only when someone pretends they do not care," she said. The words landed harder than she intended. His eyes met hers, unreadable. For a long moment they stood in silence, two strangers bound by paper and pride. Then, without warning, he said quietly, "Lucas is not someone you should trust." "Because he is your rival?" she asked, crossing her arms. "Or because he spoke to me?" Ethan's jaw clenched. "Because he will use you to get to me, and you are too kind to see it." The sincerity in his voice startled her, but before she could reply, he turned away. "Good night, Mrs. Cole." She watched him walk into his study, the door closing softly behind him. That night, Lena sat on the balcony alone, the city sprawling below like a sea of light. Somewhere beneath the marble and glass, she began to see the cracks in Ethan's armor, the man behind the title, behind the arrogance. The next morning, he was gone before sunrise, as always. On the kitchen counter, his breakfast sat untouched beside a small note written in clean, precise handwriting. "Board meeting at 9. Do not engage with Hale." She rolled her eyes but folded the note carefully before heading to the hospital. Her mother's health had stabilized, but the bills were relentless. Sitting by the bedside, Lena held her mother's frail hand. "I am married now, Mom," she whispered softly. "It is complicated." Her mother smiled weakly. "Complicated can still mean beautiful, honey. Just do not lose yourself trying to be what someone else needs." Those words lingered with her the entire day. That evening, when she returned to the penthouse, Ethan was already home, his tie loosened, sleeves rolled up as he went through files in the living room. The sight of him without the polished facade caught her off guard. "You are working late," she said. "It is what I do," he replied, not looking up. "You could at least have dinner," she said, placing a plate beside him. The chef made enough for two. He glanced at the food, then at her. "You did not have to." "I know," she said softly, "but maybe I wanted to." Something shifted in his eyes then, subtle but undeniable. He sat down, and for the first time since their wedding, they ate together. No business talk, no cold silence, just the clinking of silverware and small, hesitant smiles. She asked about his work, he asked about her mother. For a moment, the walls between them thinned. After dinner, Lena reached for the dishes, but Ethan stopped her. "I will handle it," he said. "You cooked." She looked at him in surprise. "You? The Ethan Cole doing dishes?" He gave a half smile. "Do not get used to it." Later, as he stood at the sink, sleeves rolled, water running over his hands, Lena caught herself smiling. The man who claimed to feel nothing was there, sleeves wet, doing something ordinary, something human. As she watched, he turned slightly, catching her gaze. Neither of them looked away. For once, there was no contract, no deal, just a flicker of truth between two people pretending not to care. That night, long after the lights were out, Lena lay awake thinking about that look, the warmth it carried, and the quiet realization that scared her most. Maybe, just maybe, this marriage of convenience was beginning to feel real. The following days settled into a strange rhythm. Ethan left early, returned late, and Lena filled the empty hours with charity events, hospital visits, and silent dinners that felt less like obligation and more like habit. The walls of the penthouse, once sterile and cold, began to carry traces of her presence: a small plant by the window, a framed photo of her mother, the faint scent of vanilla that lingered after she baked. Ethan noticed it all, though he said nothing. One night he came home earlier than usual. Lena was sitting on the couch, curled under a blanket, reading. She looked up, surprised. "You are home before midnight. Should I be worried?" He chuckled softly, removing his tie. "The board meeting ended early. Apparently miracles happen." She smiled and closed her book. "Would you like some tea?" He nodded, and they found themselves in the kitchen, steam rising from 2 mugs as the city lights glittered beyond the glass. It was the first quiet moment they had shared that did not feel forced. "Why do you always stay so late at work?" she asked. "Because work does not lie," he replied simply. "People do." His honesty caught her off guard. "That sounds lonely," she said gently. Ethan looked at her, a faint sadness in his eyes. "Lonely is predictable. I can handle predictable." She wanted to tell him that predictability was not living, but before she could, his phone buzzed. The name flashing across the screen made his expression darken. Lucas Hale. Ethan declined the call instantly, his jaw tightening. "What does he want?" she asked. "Trouble, he always does." His tone turned cold again, the moment between them breaking like glass. "I will handle it." The next morning, Lena went to a charity meeting at the downtown foundation. When she arrived, the last person she expected to see was Lucas. He was charming as ever, surrounded by donors, his confidence effortless. He saw her and smiled. "Mrs. Cole, I did not expect to see you here." She hesitated but managed a polite smile. "I am here representing the Cole Foundation." "Ah, yes. The charity your husband funds but never visits," Lucas said smoothly. "You are doing all the real work, I see." His words were teasing but carried an undercurrent of something else. "Ethan has his priorities," she replied carefully. "As do I." "And what are those priorities?" he asked. "Fixing what money cannot," she said, then excused herself. But the encounter left her uneasy. When she returned home, Ethan was already waiting, standing by the window with his hands in his pockets. "You met with Hale today," he said flatly. She froze. "How did you—" "He called me. Apparently, you made quite an impression." There was something dangerous in his calm. "Ethan, it was a charity event. He approached me." "And you spoke to him?" "For 2 minutes." "That is 2 minutes too long." The words came out sharper than he intended, but he did not take them back. Lena's eyes widened. "You do not own me," she said, her voice trembling. "This is supposed to be a partnership, not a prison." Ethan turned away, raking a hand through his hair. "You do not understand what he is capable of." "Then explain it to me instead of treating me like I am part of your company," she said. "I am your wife, at least for now." The silence that followed was suffocating. "Finally," he said, quieter this time. "Lucas cost my father everything once. I will not let him take anything else." Lena's anger softened a little at the pain behind his words. "Then maybe you should stop fighting everyone who is not him," she whispered. But Ethan said nothing more. That night, sleep refused to come to either of them. In separate rooms, they lay awake, thinking of the same thing, the way anger could hide fear, and fear could hide care. The next morning, when Lena entered the dining room, she found a single white rose in a vase on the table and a note beside it. It was written in Ethan's precise handwriting. "For what I said last night, you are right. This is a partnership." For the first time, she smiled reading his words. Maybe he was learning how to apologize. And somewhere deep inside, though she would never admit it out loud, her heart started to believe that maybe, just maybe, Ethan Cole was learning how to feel. Winter turned to spring, and the boundaries of their fake marriage began to blur. What had started as an arrangement was slowly becoming something that neither of them could define. Ethan no longer avoided dinners at home. Sometimes he came back early, just to ask how her day was. Lena no longer tiptoed around him. She teased him, challenged him, even made him laugh once in a while. And every time she laughed, Ethan felt something dangerous bloom inside his chest, something that had nothing to do with contracts or convenience. One evening, they attended a gala hosted by one of Ethan's investors. Cameras flashed, champagne flowed, and the room sparkled with conversation. Lena stood beside him, poised and graceful, wearing a sapphire dress that caught every flicker of light. Ethan had seen countless women in expensive gowns, but tonight, she was all he could see. When the chairman introduced her as Mrs. Cole, the word felt different now, heavier, truer. As they mingled, Ethan caught glimpses of admiration directed toward her men looking too long, smiles lingering too much, and every time his chest tightened. Then, inevitably, Lucas Hale appeared. He approached with that same smug grin. "Mrs. Cole, we meet again. You look radiant tonight," he said smoothly. "And Ethan, still guarding her like a secret?" Ethan's expression did not change, but Lena could sense the tension in his hand as it rested on her back. "Enjoy the evening, Hale," Ethan said coldly, but Lucas only smirked and leaned toward Lena. "If you ever need a husband who listens, you know where to find me." The words were meant as a joke, but they landed like a spark on dry wood. Ethan's glare could have cut glass. He took Lena's hand and led her away, his jaw set tight. Outside, the night air was crisp, the city alive beneath them. He stopped by the fountain, finally turning to her. "What was that supposed to mean?" he demanded. "You think I wanted him to say that?" She shot back, stunned. "I was polite, that is all." "You smiled at him," Ethan said, his voice low but trembling with emotion. "You never smile at me like that." The words slipped out before he could stop them. Lena's eyes softened. "Because when I smile at you, you look away," she whispered. Silence fell between them, raw and real. Ethan exhaled, his hand running through his hair as if trying to erase what he had just admitted. "This was supposed to be simple," he said quietly. "It was never simple," she replied. "You made sure of that." For a long moment, he just looked at her, the truth of his own feelings dawning in his eyes. Then, without a word, he stepped closer. "Tell me to stop," he said, but she did not. And when he kissed her, it was not the cold, calculated gesture of a man playing a role. It was desperate, honest, the kind of kiss that rewrites everything. When they finally pulled apart, both were breathing hard, stunned by what had just happened. "Ethan," she began, but he shook his head. "Do not say anything," he whispered. "If I hear you say it, it becomes real. And if it is real, I will not be able to let you go." For the rest of the night, neither of them spoke of it again. Yet something had changed, irrevocably. The next morning, Ethan acted as if nothing had happened, burying himself in meetings, while Lena tried to convince herself it was just a moment, a mistake. But the look in his eyes when he left the apartment told her otherwise. Later that week, gossip headlines began to circulate. Billionaire Ethan Cole's mysterious wife captivates New York society. Their photos at the gala were everywhere, including one of Ethan looking at her, not like a man posing for the cameras, but like someone who had already fallen. Lena saw it and felt her heart ache. What would happen when the world found out that their marriage was not real, that behind every perfect photograph there was a lie? That night, as she stood by the window watching the city glow, Ethan came to stand beside her. He did not say a word. He just reached for her hand, held it gently, and whispered, "I do not care what the world thinks. I only care about what you see when you look at me." For the first time, she could not hide the truth in her eyes. She saw him, not the billionaire, not the CEO, but the man who was finally learning how to love. The days after the gala felt different, quiet, charged, and full of unspoken tension. Ethan tried to bury himself in work, but the memory of that kiss lingered, breaking through every wall he had spent years building. Lena tried to convince herself that it meant nothing, that it was a mistake made in a moment of confusion, but every time she saw him, her pulse betrayed her. The line between contract and connection had vanished, and neither of them knew what to do about it. One rainy evening, Ethan returned home earlier than usual. The lights were dim, soft jazz playing in the background. Lena was in the kitchen, barefoot, humming softly as she stirred something on the stove. The sight stopped him cold. For a moment it felt like home, something he had never allowed himself to have. "You are early," she said, turning with a smile that warmed the room. "Board meeting got cancelled," he replied, his voice rougher than usual. "I thought I would surprise you." "You just did," she said, laughing. He stepped closer, leaning against the counter. "What are you cooking?" "Soup," she said, ladling some into a bowl. "Do not worry, it is not poisoned." He smirked. "Good to know." They ate together, the rain tapping gently against the glass, the silence between them comfortable for once. After dinner, Ethan found himself telling her about his father, the man behind the empire. "He built coal industries from nothing," Ethan said quietly. "But he was ruthless. To him, success was survival. Love was weakness." "And you believed him," she said gently. "For a long time," Ethan admitted. "Until you—" Her breath caught. "Ethan." But he continued, his voice softer now. "You make everything I thought I understood feel wrong, or maybe right." Before she could reply, his phone buzzed on the counter. The caller ID flashed across the screen, Lucas Hale. Ethan's face hardened instantly. He answered, his tone clipped. "What do you want, Hale?" Lena could hear the smug voice on the other end, even without speakerphone. "Just thought you should know. The press is asking questions about your marriage. Rumor has it, it is not as real as it looks." Ethan's eyes darkened. "You are crossing a line." "Oh, I crossed it a long time ago," Lucas said before hanging up. Ethan threw the phone onto the counter, his jaw tight. "What does he mean?" Lena asked. "He is bluffing," Ethan said quickly, but the tension in his shoulders said otherwise. "Ethan," she pressed, "is there something I should know?" He looked at her, conflicted. "The merger," he said finally. "It is falling apart. If the board finds out this marriage was a contract, everything collapses. Lucas wants to expose us." "Expose us?" she repeated, her voice trembling. "So this is all about your company again?" "It started that way," he said. "But it is not anymore. Then why do I still feel like I am just part of a deal?" The words hit harder than either expected. Ethan stepped forward, but she backed away. "Lena, please. I never wanted to hurt you." "Then why do you keep choosing control over honesty?" she said, her voice breaking. "You cannot keep shutting me out. The silence that followed was unbearable. Ethan finally spoke, his voice barely above a whisper. "Because if I let you in completely, I will not survive losing you." The confession hung in the air, fragile and real. Lena's eyes filled with tears. "You already lost me once," she said softly. "Do not do it again." She walked past him, the echo of her footsteps fading down the hall. Ethan stood there, hands trembling, realizing that for the first time in his life, power could not fix what was breaking. Later that night, alone in his office, he stared at the contract they had both signed months ago. His name, her name, the rules that had once kept them safe now felt like chains. He picked up a pen, drew a line through the clause that said, "No emotional involvement," and whispered to the empty room, "Too late." Outside, the storm raged, but inside, for the first time, Ethan felt something he had never allowed himself to feel before: fear. Not of losing his empire, but of losing the only woman who had ever made him want to be more than a name on a contract. The morning after the storm, the world seemed quieter, but the tension inside the penthouse was deafening. Lena had not come home that night. Ethan barely slept, pacing the floor, checking his phone every few minutes, fighting the urge to call her. Pride held him back, but fear was winning. By sunrise, he finally gave in, dialing her number again and again. No answer. His chest felt tight. He had built an empire by being in control. Yet here he was, helpless because of one woman. When his phone finally buzzed, it was not her, it was his assistant, Marianne. "Sir," she said urgently, "you need to turn on the television." Ethan grabbed the remote, and the headline hit him like a punch to the gut. Billionaire Ethan Cole's marriage exposed fake wife, real scandal. On screen was a photo from their wedding day, followed by documents that looked disturbingly real, copies of their contract being signatures, and even the clause about no emotional involvement. Ethan's stomach turned cold. Lucas Hale had done it. Within hours, the news spread everywhere. Reporters camped outside Cole Industries. Investors demanded explanations. The board called an emergency meeting, and Lena, she had become the target. Paparazzi swarmed her mother's hospital. Headlines painted her as a gold digger who married for money. Ethan gripped the edge of his desk until his knuckles turned white. He knew exactly who had leaked the documents, and he also knew what it would cost to fix this. By noon, he was standing in the boardroom, surrounded by men in suits, their eyes sharp with judgment. "Is it true?" one of them demanded. "Was the marriage a sham?" Ethan could have lied. He could have blamed her. Instead, he stood tall. "It was," he said. The room erupted in whispers. He continued before anyone could speak. "But it became real, and if you think a piece of paper can define love, you are wrong." The board chairman slammed his fist on the table. "You have jeopardized this company, Cole." Ethan met his gaze, calm but resolute. "Then take it. Take the company, take the shares, take the title, but you will not take her name through the mud." Gasps rippled through the room. By the time he left the building, his resignation was already on the news. Cameras followed him, shouting questions, but he ignored them all. His only focus was finding Lena. She was at the hospital, helping her mother pack. When she saw him walk in, her face hardened. "Ethan, you should not be here," she said quietly. "There are reporters outside." "I do not care," he said, his voice rough. "You were right about me. I let fear ruin everything, but not this time." "You lost your company," she said, stunned. "I let it go," he corrected, "because the only thing worth keeping was you." For a moment she just stared at him, searching his eyes for the truth. "You do not owe me anything," she whispered. "I owe you honesty," he said. "For once I wanted you to see the man, not the empire." Her mother watched silently from the bed, tears glistening in her eyes. "He looks like a man who finally understands what love costs," she said softly. Lena's defenses began to crumble. "You cannot just walk away from everything you built," she said. Ethan smiled faintly. "I built it so I could have the power to choose, and I choose you." Outside, cameras flashed, reporters shouted, but inside that small hospital room, the noise faded. Ethan reached into his pocket and pulled out a folded piece of paper, their old contract. Without a word, he tore it in half. Then again, letting the pieces fall like snow to the floor. "No more contracts," he said. "No more pretending." Lena felt her breath hitch, her eyes burning with tears she had tried so hard to hold back. For the first time since their deal began, there were no terms, No lies, just two people standing in the wreckage of everything false, finally free to be real. When Ethan reached for her hand, she did not pull away. Outside the window, the storm had cleared. And for the first time, so had their hearts. 2 weeks passed since Ethan's resignation shook the business world. The headlines had begun to fade, replaced by new scandals, new stories, but his name still lingered in the background, the CEO who chose love over power. Coal Industries moved on without him, but Ethan did not look back. For the first time in years, he woke without meetings, without pressure, without pretending. Yet, without Lena by his side, the silence was unbearable. After that day at the hospital, she had asked for space, and he respected that. Every day he wrote her a message he never sent, words like apologies and promises tangled between fear and hope. Meanwhile, Lena tried to rebuild her own peace. She had moved her mother into a small cottage outside the city, a place with sunlight and quiet mornings. She spent her days painting again, something she had given up years ago. Each brushstroke felt like therapy, a way to make sense of the chaos that had turned her life upside down. Still, every time the wind rattled the windows, she found herself thinking about Ethan, his voice, his stubbornness, the way he looked at her when the world was falling apart. One afternoon, while she was sketching by the window, she received an envelope. No return address, only her name written in his handwriting. Inside was a ticket, an invitation to an art gallery opening titled, "The Truth We Build." At the bottom, in small print, was a single line, "For Lena, who taught me what real foundations are made of." Her hands trembled. That night she almost did not go. Her heart said yes, her fear said no. But when her mother gently smiled and said, "Honey, some people deserve one more chance," she knew what she had to do. The gallery was in the heart of the city, warm lights glowing against the glass. As she stepped inside, she froze. The space was filled with large canvases, paintings of cities, of hands reaching for each other, of broken glass reassembled into something beautiful. At the center stood one painting unlike the rest. It showed a woman standing by a window, light falling across her face, her expression calm but strong. The plaque below it read, "The Woman Who Stayed." She turned slowly, and there he was. Ethan stood at the far end of the gallery, no suit, no tie, just a simple shirt, his eyes searching for her. When he saw her, his breath caught. "You came?" he said softly. "You asked?" she replied. He smiled, a little nervous for the first time in his life. "I wanted you to see it. I sold my shares in Coal Industries, used the money to open this gallery. It is for local artists, people who never get seen." Lena's eyes softened. "You did all this? You once said love should fix what money cannot," he said. "So I am trying to fix something. Maybe me." For a long moment, neither spoke. Then she asked quietly, "And what about us, Ethan? Is that something you still want to fix?" He took a step closer, his voice trembling slightly. "It was never broken, Lena. I was. You showed me that power without purpose is nothing. And love is not control. It is choosing the same person, even when you have lost everything else." Tears welled in her eyes. "You do not owe me this speech." "I owe you everything," he said, pulling something from his pocket. It was not a diamond ring, just a small silver band, simple, sincere. No contracts, no signatures, no board to impress. Just a promise if you are willing to start over. She stared at him, her heart pounding, the room spinning with memories, the fake wedding, the lies, the fights, the kiss. And now this. Slowly, she reached out, her fingers brushing his. "You really did learn how to feel," she whispered. "Only because you taught me," he said. When he slipped the ring onto her finger, the crowd around them applauded softly, though for a moment, it felt like the world had gone completely still. As they stood surrounded by art made from pain and love, Ethan realized something deeper than success. Real love was not built in boardrooms. It was built in forgiveness. And in that quiet, luminous gallery, he finally found his home. 2 weeks passed since Ethan's resignation shook the business world. The headlines had begun to fade, replaced by new scandals, new stories. But his name still lingered in the background, the CEO who chose love over power. Coal Industries moved on without him. But Ethan did not look back. For the first time in years, he woke without meetings, without pressure, without pretending. Yet, without Lena by his side, the silence was unbearable. After that day at the hospital, she had asked for space, and he respected that. Every day he wrote her a message he never sent, words like apologies and promises tangled between fear and hope. Meanwhile, Lena tried to rebuild her own peace. She had moved her mother into a small cottage outside the city, a place with sunlight and quiet mornings. She spent her days painting again, something she had given up years ago. Each brushstroke felt like therapy, a way to make sense of the chaos that had turned her life upside down. Still, every time the wind rattled the windows, she found herself thinking about Ethan, his voice, his stubbornness, the way he looked at her when the world was falling apart. One afternoon, while she was sketching by the window, she received an envelope. No return address, only her name written in his handwriting. Inside was a ticket, an invitation to an art gallery opening titled, "The Truth We Build." At the bottom, in small print, was a single line, "For Lena, who taught me what real foundations are made of." Her hands trembled. That night, she almost did not go. Her heart said yes, her fear said no. But when her mother gently smiled and said, "Honey, some people deserve one more chance," she knew what she had to do. The gallery was in the heart of the city, warm lights glowing against the glass. As she stepped inside, she froze. The space was filled with large canvases, paintings of cities, of hands reaching for each other, of broken glass reassembled into something beautiful. At the center stood one painting unlike the rest. It showed a woman standing by a window, light falling across her face, her expression calm but strong. The plaque below it read, "The Woman Who Stayed." She turned slowly, and there he was. Ethan stood at the far end of the gallery, no suit, no tie, just a simple shirt, his eyes searching for her. When he saw her, his breath caught. "You came," he said softly. "You asked," she replied. He smiled, a little nervous for the first time in his life. "I wanted you to see it. I sold my shares in coal industries, used the money to open this gallery. It is for local artists, people who never get seen." Lena's eyes softened. "You did all this?" "You once said love should fix what money cannot," he said. "So I am trying to fix something. Maybe me." For a long moment, neither spoke. Then she asked quietly, "And what about us, Ethan? Is that something you still want to fix?" He took a step closer, his voice trembling slightly. "It was never broken, Lena. I was. You showed me that power without purpose is nothing. And love is not control. It is choosing the same person, even when you have lost everything else." Tears welled in her eyes. "You do not owe me this speech. I owe you everything," he said, pulling something from his pocket. It was not a diamond ring, just a small silver band, simple, sincere. No contracts, no signatures, no board to impress. Just a promise if you are willing to start over. She stared at him, her heart pounding, the room spinning with memories, the fake wedding, the lies, the fights, the kiss. And now, this. Slowly, she reached out, her fingers brushing his. "You really did learn how to feel," she whispered. "Only because you taught me," he said. When he slipped the ring onto her finger, the crowd around them applauded softly, though for a moment it felt like the world had gone completely still. As they stood surrounded by art made from pain and love, Ethan realized something deeper than success. Real love was not built in boardrooms. It was built in forgiveness. And in that quiet, luminous gallery, he finally found his home.